Welcome to Chapter 2, Section 6, Adding and Subtracting Fractions with Unlike Denominators. Our goal is to fully understand how to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. Now there are two methods to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. The first method, Method 1, and write this down in your notebook on the back side of a page or in a blank spot, is to find a common denominator, and we're going to do that by multiplying one denominator by the other denominator. So that's method 1. Now method 2 also uses a common denominator. Both methods, you have to have a common denominator to add and subtract. Now multiplication you do not, but in addition and subtraction you must have a common denominator. Method 2 is to find the least common denominator. Now method 1 is a little quicker at the beginning, but depending on the numbers could get a little bit tougher and harder to do by hand. Where method 2 requires more upfront work to find the least common denominator, but once you find it, the math may be easier. Let's look at an example problem. This is using method 1. So remember, method 1 is to find a common denominator by multiplying the two denominators together. So we're going to multiply 8 times 7. 8 times 7 is 56. So we're trying to get a denominator with a 56 in both cases. Now, to make that happen, what we need to do is we need to multiply this one by 7 and this by 7. Because 8 times 7 is 56. And 7 times 8 and 2 times 8. In this case, we're going to multiply both of these by 8, the 2 and the 7, to get the common denominator. Now, the fraction I'm multiplying by is 7 over 7 for this one, and 8 over here, 8 for this one, because these are fractions equal to 1. So 8 times 7 is 56. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 8 is 56. 2 times 8 is 16. So what I've done is I've remade our fractions into equivalent fractions that are larger but have a common denominator. Now once again, I took this 8 and the 7, and I multiplied this side by 7 over 7. I multiplied this side by 8 over 8, because each of these equal 1. 1/8 times 7 over 7 multiplied together is 7 over 56. 2/7 multiplied by 8 over 8 equals 16 over 56. And so now, as you can see, we have rewritten these with a common denominator. 7 plus 16 is 23 over 56. And then, when possible, we're going to simplify. In this case, these are not something we can reduce because they are relatively prime. This was the first method, and it's to find a common denominator when multiplying the denominators together. And now we're going to look at method 2. But before we can even begin, we need to write these as improper fractions. So if you remember, that's 6 times 1 plus 1. So 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7, 6. And the reason I say do you remember is because we did this just a few sections ago when we were comparing fractions and decimals. The second one, we do 8 times 1, 8 times 1, plus 5. That's 13. So we have 7 6 minus 13 8. Now we cannot subtract these without having a common denominator. We must have a common denominator. Method 1 was to multiply the denominators together to get your common denominator. But there's another way, and this is method 2. In this method, we're going to look for the multiples of 6, because here's our first denominator, and the multiples of 8 for our second denominator. When we look at the multiples, 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, etc. 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3, etc. We notice that 6 times 4 is 24, and 8 times 3 is 24. So by listing the multiples of each denominator and finding the lowest common denominator, which in this case equals 24, we can multiply the fractions, multiply by fractions equal to 1. So I need to make this something over 24. I need to multiply it by 4 over 4. Now remember, 4 over 4 is equal to 1. That's where we get this 1 right here, because the numerator and denominator are the same. And 6 times 4 is 24. 7 times 4 is 28. So this becomes 28 over 24. Now 8, I'm going to multiply by 3. 8 times 3 is 24. So I'm going to multiply the whole fraction by 3 over 3, which is 1. 13 times 3 is 39. So here I have 28 24ths minus 39 24ths. If I have 28 of something and I owe 39 of something, I'm going to end up owing money, and I'm going to subtract them, and I'm going to owe 11 of them. So I'm going to owe, there's my negative right there, see the negative right there, 11. Now again, I solve these by rewriting with a common denominator. So my answer is negative 11 for 24. So we have two methods to solve addition and subtraction in fractions. Both are finding common denominators. We have to find common denominator in both cases. The first method, we're going to multiply the denominators together to get the common denominator. The second method, we're going to find the least common denominator. So I got more problems. Evaluate t minus 4/5 for t equals 5/6. So first thing we need to do is replace the t with 5/6. So this becomes 5/6 minus 4/5. Notice I did it directly underneath it. And here we substituted the 5/6 for the t. Now I'm going to multiply by fractions equal to 1 to get a common denominator. So I like the fact where we multiply them together. So I'm going to multiply this one by 5/5 using this denominator. And multiply this one by 6/6 using that denominator. So I have a common denominator of 30 in both cases. 6 times 5 is 30. 5 times 6 is 30. Now 5 times 5 in the numerator is 25. 4 times 6 in the numerator is 24. 25 30ths minus 24 30ths is 1/30. And there's no simplification. As a reminder, I used method 1 and multiplied the denominators to get my common denominator of 30. Here's example 3. In this case, we have two dancers that are making necklaces from ribbon for their costumes. They need pieces measuring 13 3/4 inches and 12 7/8 inches. How much ribbon will be left over if the pieces are cut from a 36-inch length? Well, first I need to find out how much they're using. So I'm going to take 13 3/4. I'm going to take 12 7/8, and I'm going to write them as improper fractions. To do that, I'm going to take 4 times 13 plus 3. 4 times 13 plus 3 over 4. 4 times 13 is 52 plus 3 over 4. And that's 55/4. So this is 55/4 is my first fraction when I made this into an improper fraction. I'm going to take 8 times 12 plus 7 for my second fraction that needs to be made improper. So I have 8 times 12 plus 7 over 8. 8 times 12 is 96 plus 7 over 8. And that is 103 over 8. So my second conversion from a mixed number to an improper fraction is 103 over 8. Now I need to rewrite with common denominators. In this case, I'm going to use lowest common denominator. And I did that because I know 4 times 2 is 8. So I'm going to multiply just this side by 2 over 2. 4 times 2 is 8. 55 times 2 would be, let's see, that'd be 10, carry the 1, 110. Now I can add. So I get 110 plus 103 is 213. 213 over 8 is going to be, let's see, 8 goes into 213. 8 goes into 20 two times. That's 16. 53. 8 goes into 53 six times. 48. Subtract 5. Remainder 5. So I'm going to make that 5 and 8s. So our answer is 26 and 5/8. Now I went through that quite quickly, so if you're having any issues, please rewind and watch again. This is how much ribbon they need, but that was not our question. Our question was how much will be left over. So I need to take the 36 inches and subtract the 26 and 5/8. 36 becomes 36 over 1 when I write it as an improper fraction. And I'm going to back up here and write this as an improper fraction. So this is going to be 213. We're going to write them as improper fractions, and afterwards we're going to get a common denominator. I have a 1 and an 8. Again, it's easier for me to use the least common denominator in this case instead of multiplying them together. Although it wouldn't make much difference with the 1. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 36 is 288. So they're now rewritten with common denominators. I can go ahead and subtract them. 288 minus 213. It's 5, 7. So I have 75/8, which if I simplify, 8 goes into 75. How many times? That's right, 9. With a 3 remainder. So it's 9 and 3 ninths. I'm sorry, 8ths. 9 and 3/8. So there will be 9 and 3/8 inches left. You have 3 try this. I will see you in class tomorrow.